Hey guys, tonight we slip into the moonlit streets of a medieval town. A place where the air smells like boiled cabbage and horse sweat. The cobblestones are slick with who knows what, and every shadow seems to lean toward you with teeth. You're not a merchant or a monk. You're something much more complicated. You're an assassin. And congratulations, you've just been hired for a job that pays terribly, stains your soul permanently, and almost always ends with you face down in a puddle. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before dawn in the back room of a tannery, wedged between a rack of curing hides and a barrel of lye. The stink could peel paint off a cathedral wall. You roll over and remember, yes, you're still alive. For now. That's already better than your former partner, whose body is currently serving as a cautionary tale in some dungeon corridor. You stretch, careful not to make noise. Assassins aren't supposed to make noise. That's kind of the whole brand. But it's hard to be stealthy when your joints creak like an old ship thanks to years of crawling through privy pipes and sleeping on floorboards harder than Bishop's doctrine. Your first mission was a blur, a noble's mistress, poisoned figs, and a last-minute change of plan because the target decided she was on a diet. You improvised with a lace handkerchief soaked in belladonna, a risky move. Belladonna is hard to dose. Too little, and she just gets dizzy and flirty. Too much, and her eyes roll back before the after-dinner prayer. You got lucky. Ish. She died, but you also touched your own lip while handling the cloth. That fever dream lasted 3 days, and during it you confessed to a fireplace. Disposable is the word they use behind your back. That's not metaphorical. In many circles, assassins are less respected than thieves. You're not seen as brave or noble. You're a tool, one that's discarded the moment it stops being useful. And stops being useful includes sneezing at the wrong moment or letting your face be seen. Historians still argue whether most assassins were trained professionals or desperate peasants manipulated into dirty deeds. The truth's probably somewhere between. You grew up in a poor village, where the only career options were starve, plow, or join some guy in a cloak who promises money in exchange for eternal silence. So you trained. Knife work in the dark, climbing crumbling walls, listening for the telltale rattle of chainmail beneath a cloak, and the discipline of silence. Not just your voice, but your thoughts. No attachments, no second guessing, no names. You don't even write things down. You memorize everything like a walking, blinking parchment that stabs. And you never ask who the target is or why they deserve it. That's not your job. The fewer questions, the longer you live. It's like being a medieval waiter. Just serve the poison and smile. You're not the only one out there either. Whole networks of shadowy agents exist across Europe, from the Nizari Hashashin of Persia, whose name supposedly gave us the word assassin, to the private enforcers of Florentine banking families. Some wore silks, some wore sackcloth. All lived on borrowed time. Quirky fact for you. One 13th century Mediterranean guild reportedly tested new recruits by making them leap off a ledge into a pit of hay. If they hesitated, they failed. If they broke a leg, they got patched up and told, "Good hustle." Not a great benefits package, but you take what you can get. The pay when it arrives is usually handed to you by a terrified scribe who won't make eye contact. Sometimes it's coins in a wax-sealed pouch. Sometimes it's a cryptic note that sends you on a treasure hunt through 6 abandoned barns and 1 oddly chatty goose. Your recruiter, if you can call him that, is a man named something forgettable. let's say Brother Selwyn. He speaks with the casual menace of someone who's watched a lot of people die and remembers none of their names. He gives you just enough information to get the job done and absolutely no reassurance. You're valuable until you're not, he tells you. There's camaraderie, sort of. You occasionally share glances with other agents at a distance. There's a nod here, a tucked sleeve there. You know not to speak. You don't want to know their names. It's better not to miss people when they disappear. And they do disappear, that is. One day, a familiar silhouette stops showing up on rooftops or near the Baker's Square. Rumors swirl. Some say captured. Some say defected. Others say, well, retired, which is usually code for weighted down with stones and tossed into a canal. You trudge through rain, mud, and whispered instructions. Every job adds a little more wear to your boots and a little more shadow to your eyes. You learn to look harmless, move silently, and vanish before the candle gutters out. But deep down, you know you're not invincible. You're one crossbow misfire, one mistaken identity, one jealous employer away from being the wrong kind of headline in a traveling bard's ballad. Oh wait, bards don't sing about you. Too risky. You're not even the villain. You're a footnote. The weirdest part? Sometimes you feel proud. Not of the killing exactly, but of the precision, the planning, the artistry. It's like solving a horrible puzzle that no one knows existed. And if you do it right, no one ever will. Still, the alley stinks. Your joints ache. And your next mark is holed up in a fortified wine cellar with 3 guards, 2 dogs, and 1 pet lynx. No one told you about the lynx. They never do. You hold your breath and squeeze 2 drops of extract from a pale green vial. It sizzles as it hits the rim of your blade, acidic, bitter, and already eating through the metal just a little. You cap the bottle tightly and whisper a prayer that your fingers don't brush your lips again. You still have nightmares about that fireplace confession. Poison is supposed to make your job easier, in theory. In practice, it makes things complicated, expensive, and deeply humiliating when the wrong person drinks the wrong cup. You started small, crushed elderberries and mistletoe boiled down into a sticky tar. The village apothecary, who's missing 2 fingers and probably most of his morals, was your first teacher. You watched him test samples by poking frogs, sniffing fumes, and once, memorably, rubbing a paste on his eyelids to really feel the potency. You learned fast that nature's medicine cabinet is also its murder drawer. Hemlock, foxglove, wolfsbane, arsenic scraped from old well stones. It's all useful, and it all wants to kill you just as much as your target. You keep your vials in a leather pouch sealed so tight that opening it feels like defusing a bomb, if bombs came with corks and a faint smell of goat urine. One time you tried something experimental, mixing dried belladonna with fermented honey mead. It was supposed to mimic a tonic popular with nobles. Instead, it turned into a bubbling purple foam that made the cat vomit for hours. You made a mental note. No more improvising during storms. And then there's the classic, poison rings. Looks cool, right? Very cinematic. Except medieval metallurgy isn't that precise. You end up leaking venom on your gloves, or worse, your food. You've seen it happen. An assassin named Miko took a bite of roast duck at the same banquet where he'd slipped hemlock into a duke's goblet. Same spoon, same death. Historians still argue whether real assassins actually favored poison, or whether that was propaganda from their enemies. There are records of strange deaths and mysterious fevers, but official cause? Usually blamed on evil air or divine wrath. Sure, divine wrath served in a wine cup that smelled faintly like almonds. You also have to grow or source your ingredients. Some you can buy from market stalls if you ask for the special herbs with a certain wink. Others require midnight digging in cursed woods or deals with whispering nuns who may or may not be part of a cult. And don't get too excited if something is labeled safe. Cinnamon was once used as a preservative for embalmed corpses. Let that ruin your breakfast toast. Your stomach churns constantly. Not from guilt, although, let's be honest, you stopped pretending you're the good guy months ago, but from all the accidental sips, sniffs, and cross-contaminations. You've built up a weird tolerance, enough to survive mild exposure, not enough to feel confident when a droplet drips on your boot. And testing? You're the lab rat. You sip, taste, wait. You start carrying charcoal powder to induce vomiting. It's gritty and unpleasant, but better than convulsing in a hay cart beside a shocked farmer and a dying mule. The worst part is your targets rarely cooperate. You can spend days perfecting the right dosage and delivery, only to find your mark has decided to go on a fasting cleanse. Or they've brought a food taster, someone who's been blackmailed into taking tiny bites and hoping their tongue doesn't swell up like a bladder. One time you snuck into a noble's chambers, prepared to lace her ceremonial goblet with a sleeping elixir. Instead, you found she'd switched to drinking straight from a goatskin flask strapped to her thigh. She noticed you, smiled, and offered a sip. You declined. She laughed and called you bashful. You fled through the window, dignity in tatters. It's not just humans you have to poison either. Sometimes it's guard dogs. Sometimes it's entire barrels of mead meant for a wedding party. Once, memorably, you were told to eliminate a rival stable boy. Apparently, he'd seen too much. You laced his apple with nightshade and felt terrible the whole time. He was maybe 12. Also, it turned out he hadn't seen much, just wanted to steal oats. Quirky fact, in parts of medieval France, it was rumored that women brewed love potions with pigeon hearts and powdered pearls, which sometimes doubled as slow-acting poisons when their crushes didn't reciprocate. So really, you're not even the most dramatic one out there. And if your concoctions fail, you don't just fail the job. You leave traces. Poison can be traced if you're sloppy. Not with forensics, of course, but by scent, taste, gossip. A servant who remembers a strange new jar on the shelf. A steward who heard a cork pop where there should have been none. You have to clean everything, leave no residue. That's hard when your workspace is a rat-infested cellar and your tools are mostly wooden spoons and hope. Sometimes your employers ask for creativity. They say, make it look like illness, or let it linger. One noblewoman once demanded her rival die in the arms of their lover so as to ruin them both. You had to hide crushed mandrake root inside perfume sachets. It worked. Romantic and horrifying. You worry often about your hands. They shake more now. You've got strange burn marks along your fingers. Your nail cuts are cracked. You wear gloves most of the time, not for stealth, but to keep from accidentally dosing yourself with whatever seeped into your skin last week. And let's not even talk about the time you mistook fermented garlic paste for your sleeping draught. You smelled like a curse for 4 days and couldn't convince anyone you were a threat. Still, you keep your bottles neatly lined, stoppered and labeled in a code only you understand. Symbols instead of words. A coiled serpent. A cracked chalice. A sleeping crow. It's your little secret library of death. Sometimes you think about retiring, maybe teaching a younger assassin how not to die by accidentally licking wolfsbane. But then again, you've seen what happens to retired operatives. They either vanish or end up buried in herb gardens feeding the next crop of ingredients. So, you pack your pouch, double knot your satchel, and smear a thick layer of sweet-smelling paste beneath your tongue, an antidote just in case. You've lived another day, and that's all you can ask for. Now, if only the smell of fermented catmint didn't cling so hard to your cloak. You wedge yourself into the crumbling mortar space between two castle walls, spine bent, ribs pressing against stone so cold it feels like it's trying to whisper something unpleasant directly into your bones. In the dark, you count your breaths. You've been here for 2 hours waiting for the guard rotation to shift. The longer you sit, the more you realize how much you miss doors. Forget everything you've ever seen in movies. Medieval castles weren't sleek towers with convenient ledges and open skylights. They were fortress labyrinths designed by paranoid feudal architects who hated comfort and loved murder holes. You don't sneak in so much as suffer through entry. Tight crawl spaces, freezing moats, murderously steep staircases. It's like breaking into a rock that hates you. You once tried scaling a manor house's outer wall covered in ivy. Halfway up, you discovered the ivy was actually a sort of bramble hybrid full of spiders and barbed seed pods. You made it up. You bled the whole time. The noble you killed probably thought it poetic, given the blood-spattered roses still clinging to your sleeves when you left. Your climbing gear is laughable. No, you don't have a fancy grappling hook. What you have is a fraying rope, a dull knife, and a pair of thin gloves with the fingertips worn down to your actual fingers. You make a lot of deals with gravity. Most end in bruises. Some end in confessionals. One ended in your left shoulder permanently clicking when you raise your arm above your head. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins used acrobatic entry techniques or relied more on insider contacts and open gates. Probably both. You do what works. Sometimes you scale a wall with a chicken tied to your back as a distraction. Sometimes you bribe a cook with goat cheese and sneak in through the kitchens. Either way, you always end up crawling through something slimy. And let's talk about castle interiors. They're not elegant, they're dark, damp, and echo like a sermon in a tin bucket. Every step you take sounds like an accusation. The floors creak, the walls breathe, and there's always someone sobbing in a far-off corridor. If the guards don't hear you, the rats will. You quickly learn the layout of different estates. Spiral staircases always curve clockwise. Why? So defenders coming down can swing swords more easily. You coming up are at a massive disadvantage unless you're ambidextrous or ready to throw a knife between someone's kneecaps and hope they don't scream. Then there's the roofs. Not romantic stargazing platforms, more like angled death traps covered in moss. You once tried leaping between two towers during a rainstorm. Your boot slipped. You fell into a cart full of turnips. That part wasn't terrible. The dog guarding the turnips? Much less pleasant. You still have the scar. Sometimes you pretend you're a spider. 8 limbs would be useful. So would sticky feet. But instead you've got legs cramping from cold and fingers numb with frost. And always the knowledge that if someone spots you, they don't ask questions. They just start yelling and flinging iron-tipped objects in your general direction. Let's not forget the disguises. You often pose as a chimney sweep or traveling juggler. One time you pretended to be a blind pilgrim and had to fumble your way across a courtyard using a cane and pure guesswork. You tripped over a knight. He apologized to you. It was your proudest moment. Fringe tidbit? Some minor castles had secret servant passages built behind the walls. You once found one by accident while hiding from a guard. It led straight from the wine cellar to the lord's bedroom. Useful, yes, also full of spiders. And a bat colony. You still flinch at the sound of flapping wings. You're not always alone during entry. Sometimes another operative is assigned to the same job. You meet them in the dark. You never exchange names, you share a glance, maybe a nod, and then split off into different directions, like the world's most miserable scavenger hunt. Once, you locked eyes with someone on a parapet just as a bell rang out. No words, just shared panic. You've picked so many locks you could probably open your own emotions with a bent pin. Medieval locks, though, are fickle. They're either too simple, just a wooden latch, or absurdly complex, like the one that once required you to insert a bone key and twist it while humming. You still don't know if that was an intentional mechanism or a sadistic prank. You carry chalk for marking silent symbols. A crescent moon means passable. A cross with a line means dead end. A tiny flower? That's your personal mark. No one knows what it means but you. Some days you forget. The best castle infiltration you ever managed happened because of a local festival. Everyone was drunk, painted in blue woad, and too distracted by bagpipes to notice you scaling the outer tower like a moldy squirrel. You got in, did the job, and were back in the woods before the music stopped. You consider that your peak. The worst? A winter job in a cliffside keep where the only way in was a frozen waterfall. You chipped your way up with a dagger and a prayer, only to find the target had left for pilgrimage a week earlier. Your employer's reaction? Unfortunate. Next time, check the chapel first. You've learned to move in silence. Your cloak is lined to muffle wind. Your boots are softened with scraps of wool. You even breathe differently now. Shallow, quiet, almost imaginary. But that doesn't mean you're invisible. One misplaced step on a squeaky plank and you're suddenly the center of attention. Some castle designs include traps, real ones, hidden pits, swing blade hallways, boiling oil above door frames. Most are bluff, but one time you opened a door and triggered a net of bells. You froze. The guards laughed, thinking it was a prank set by the steward. You laughed too. Later, you poisoned the steward, out of principle. Still, for all the misery, there's something satisfying about slipping unseen through the spaces meant to repel invaders. You leave no trace. No one knows you were ever there. And if they do, well, they don't get to tell anyone. The sun's rising now. You've made it out the same way you came in, through a crack in the stone, feet first, covered in scratches and glory. You're bruised, cold, and slightly wiser. And you still hate that there are no grappling hooks. You're lying flat beneath a wagon, wheels creaking gently as it rolls toward a dusty village square. The scent of horses, sweat, and moldy hay fills your nose. Your body is stiff, every joint screaming, but you can't move yet. The mark is inside the inn, and you're waiting for your cue, a bell tower chime, 2 short, 1 long. That's the signal that the lookout has eyes on your target. It's market day, the worst possible time to carry out a hit, and yet somehow always the time your clients prefer. Too many witnesses, too many smells, too many children running around with sticky fingers and an uncanny ability to spot things adults miss. You've been spotted by toddlers more often than by trained guards. You know what's underrated? Having a cover story. And you don't have one today. You're not a tinker, not a performer, not even a wandering friar this time. Just a shadow on the fringe, trying not to look like someone with murder on their to-do list. It's harder than it sounds. Your best disguise ever? Fishmonger apprentice. Reeked to high heaven, but nobody questioned the person covered in fish guts. Your worst, noble career. You had the accent wrong, the boots were too new, and someone called you out on your seal being upside down. You still get cold sweats thinking about it. Assassinating in daylight is chaos in a tunic. Shadows are short, spaces are crowded, and people are annoyingly unpredictable. The drunk might lurch into your knife's path. The merchant might suddenly shout a price right when you slip something into someone's pocket or drink. And the pigeons. Don't get started on the pigeons. Historians still argue whether public assassinations in daylight were common or just mythologized. Some say it was all poison and shadows. Others cite records of mysterious stabbings during public feasts, archery contests gone accidentally lethal, or high nobles falling from balconies that mysteriously lacked railings. You did a balcony job once. The noble was hosting a poetry reading. You posed as a servant handing out wine. When he leaned forward to read about truth and trust, you nudged. He toppled 3 stories and landed in a cart of onions. Didn't die. Broke his back and wrote vengeful limericks for the next year. Still got paid, though. Market day offers one tiny advantage: distraction. A good juggler can hold a crowd's attention for 10 whole minutes. A dancing bear, even better. You once used a fire eater's performance as cover for a crossbow shot. Blamed the explosion of sparks for the scream. No one asked questions. The fire eater got a bigger crowd. Win-win. Then there's the challenge of escape. It's not enough to finish the job. You have to vanish. And when you're surrounded by gossipy peasants, stray dogs, and opportunistic pickpockets, slipping away without notice takes finesse. You use smoke sometimes, not real smoke, just ground up spices in a heated pouch. It burns the nose, buys you 5 seconds. It works, most of the time. You once bribed a mime to cause a scene right after your hit. Never again. He followed you for 2 weeks, miming death scenes whenever you entered a town. You started having nightmares about silent screams and invisible walls. One of your more memorable kills happened during a puppet show. The target leaned in to watch a dragon bite the head off a knight. You leaned in too. A quick prick to the thigh with a poisoned pin. He laughed at the joke. Died 20 minutes later in the latrine. They said he had a weak heart. You gave yourself a gold star that day. Quirky fact: some medieval cities passed ordinances banning masks or heavy cloaks during festivals. Too many accidents involving masked acrobats, pushing nobles into wells. So, naturally, you started using garlands and painted faces. One time you disguised yourself as a maypole. Nobody questions a maypole, they just dance. But most daylight hits require proximity. You get close, closer. Wait for the mark to be distracted. A touch on the wrist, a prick with a ring, a dropped coin in a tankard. It's the finesse of not being there when they look back. You've developed the posture of someone who belongs, the gait of someone with errands, the facial expression of someone too bored to be dangerous. You envy the pickpockets sometimes. All they want is your purse. They don't have to watch a duke stagger, froth, and collapse next to a sausage vendor. They don't lie awake later wondering if the poisoned ring was too flashy. Spoiler, it was. You had to ditch it in a ditch. Still feel bitter. Open-air executions are the worst to work around. You were once assigned to assassinate someone during someone else's hanging. You were supposed to make it look like vengeance. But have you ever tried to concentrate with a noose tightening and a crowd baying for blood? It's not atmospheric. It's distracting. Also, someone threw a turnip. You still don't know why. Sometimes your mark spots you. That's the true nightmare. Eyes meet, recognition flickers, then the chase begins. Through meat stalls, over baskets of apples, into alleyways full of surprises. Once you ran straight into a nun who hit you with a candle holder and muttered something about demons. You apologized. She blessed you. It was confusing. But your most valuable skill isn't speed or stealth. It's improvisation. The moment everything goes wrong, you have to make it look like it didn't. A dropped knife becomes a spatula. A failed poison is just bad claret. That one time you couldn't get close enough, you paid a minstrel to serenade your mark until they moved into range. You've lost count of how many jobs you've done in daylight, but you never get used to the exposure, the openness, the sounds. You dream of silence sometimes, a quiet corridor, one shadow, one clean blow. But those are rare. Mostly, you kill beside sausage carts. Today's job ends quickly. Your mark downs a mug of ale you prepared earlier, laced with poppy and belladonna. His hands shake, he drops his bread, he stands too fast, and then collapses against a basket of cabbages, perfectly timed. You slip away before the first scream. Just another face in the crowd, another shopper walking into sunlight. You take the long route back, hood low, breath steady. The bell tower rings again behind you. 2 short, 1 long. The all clear. You nod to no one and disappear into the noise of the day. The job isn't always about climbing walls or slipping poison into goblets. Sometimes it's about waiting. Long, brutal stretches of motionless hours in places where nobody sane would loiter. Right now, you're buried in hay, crammed in a loft above a stable, pretending to be asleep while mice treat your ankle like a new and exciting piece of real estate. You've been here since midnight. It's nearly noon. The target still hasn't shown. He's late, and you're itchy. But you can't move, not even to scratch. One twitch, one sneeze, and the stable boy might glance up. And stable boys have sharp eyes and louder voices than you'd expect. Stakeouts are the ugliest part of the job. They sound exciting when whispered in taverns. He waited 3 days in a chimney. But what they don't tell you is that he had fleas, pneumonia, and a very unfortunate splinter in a place no one talks about. You've hidden in wine barrels, damp, behind tapestries, itchy, and once inside a dovecote. You thought the birds would ignore you. They didn't. One sat on your head and screamed for 45 minutes. That job got canceled. Historians still argue whether assassins worked alone or in cells, trading off shifts during long observations. You've tried both. Working with others sometimes helps. You can stretch, take a nap, even share stale biscuits, but it also means trusting someone not to sneeze or fall asleep and ruin everything. Sometimes you pretend to be part of the household staff. You once played scullery help for an entire week just to observe a baron's habits. You learned he took his tea with honey, enjoyed watching falconry at dawn, and frequently scratched his backside when he thought no one was looking. That last bit was, unfortunately, memorable. And yes, falconry. You nearly got skewered by one of those birds once. Tame my foot. It saw you crouched behind a hedge, decided you were dinner, and came at you talons first. You panicked and ran straight through a pigsty. The mud took days to scrub out of your boots. You still flinch at flapping wings. Quirky tidbit. There's a belief among some guards that if you place a loaf of bread at each door, intruders won't enter. The bread absorbs evil. You've eaten that bread more than once while on watch. Evil or not, it beats chewing leather. But it's not just the waiting. It's what waiting does to you. Your muscles cramp, your mind drifts, you start naming the cracks in the wall, you play word games in your head, you count rats. You try not to think about how long it's been since you had a proper bath or slept on something softer than a bale of straw. Then there are the false alarms, the footsteps that pass, the doors that creak open but reveal a servant, not your target. Your pulse jumps. You get ready. And then, nothing. Just a boy fetching firewood, or a lady's maid bringing laundry. You have to calm yourself down quietly, like whispering sweet nothings to your own adrenaline. Your worst stakeout? 3 nights crouched in the rafters of a cathedral waiting for a bishop who was allegedly a traitor. You had to watch him deliver sermons, conduct rites, and bathe in a tub behind a very thin curtain. On the 4th night, the target dropped dead. Natural causes. You didn't know whether to laugh or invoice someone. Best stakeout? A traveling noble known for midnight walks through the rose garden. You hid in a fountain and waited. When he came close, humming to himself, you rose up like a waterlogged ghost and whispered his name. The look on his face was almost worth the 5 hours you spent submerged up to your nose in stagnant water. Sometimes you write notes to yourself during stakeouts, just to stay sane. Small things. What the guards are wearing, when the bell rings, how many cats the cook keeps. You once tracked a target's pattern based entirely on when his dog was walked. You learned the dog's name too. You still whisper it sometimes. It's oddly comforting. People think patience is passive. It's not. It's an active, grueling war against every twitch and urge you have. You want to stretch, you want to eat, you want to move. But instead, you hold your breath while the baker drops off rolls 2 feet away and hums about his missing ladle. And just when you're about to give up, just when your toes have gone fully numb and you've resigned yourself to failure, he appears, the mark, moving casually through the courtyard, humming. You perk up, shift slightly, heart hammering like a blacksmith's forge. You're awake now, alive. But you can't act too soon. He might not be alone. You wait. He speaks to someone. A servant? No, another noble. That complicates things. You curse softly, only in your head, and continue your vigil. Eventually, he moves inside, alone. You slip down from the loft like a shadow shedding straw. Silent, swift. Your back protests, but your legs obey. The old rhythm returns. Soft feet, slow breath, focused eyes. You follow. A creaky board underfoot betrays you. You freeze. A cat looks up from a chair, yawns, then promptly ignores you. You owe that cat a favor. You make it to the study. He's there, writing something. You step forward, and it's done. Quick, clean, a pressure to the neck, a whisper in his ear. He slumps. You catch him, set him gently on the desk, ink spills, you leave through a window. Back in the woods, you finally let out the breath you've been holding for days. It's over. The world is green and alive. Your joints ache, you smell like hay and ink and maybe mild disappointment, but you did it. And the best part? No one knows you were there. Except maybe the cat. You drag your aching legs through the back alley of a town you don't even remember the name of. A light drizzle taps your hood, soft but persistent. You're trying to ignore the throbbing in your left shoulder. That's what happens when you jump off a hayloft and land half on, half off the actual hay. Your escape was successful, but your spine has issued a formal complaint. You head to your safe house. And by safe house, you mean a poorly ventilated attic above a dried herb vendor who snores like a warhorse and occasionally forgets you're up there. The stairs creak like they're auditioning for a ghost story. There's no door, just a curtain. The roof leaks. Your pillow is a rolled-up cloak. But it's home, kind of. You take off your boots and examine the damage. 2 blisters, a suspicious bruise, and what may be a tiny thorn from the hedge you crawled through earlier. A luxury spa treatment this is not. You down a mouthful of bitter wine that tastes like regret and mothballs, then sink into your straw mattress, hoping sleep comes fast. It doesn't. You're not allowed to relax. Not really. There's always the risk of being followed. You listen for sounds, footsteps, the clink of a blade, even the sneeze of a hidden observer. Paranoia is a necessary part of the job. You once woke up mid-dream because you thought you heard someone sharpen a dagger. It was a mouse chewing your belt. Historians still argue whether assassins had dedicated safe havens or whether they simply moved constantly, sleeping in barns, ditches, or sympathetic monasteries. You've done all 3. The monastery option is surprisingly comfy, provided you can fake prayerful silence and tolerate watery cabbage soup. You're never fully off duty. Even your downtime is half preparation. You clean your blades, check your disguises, rub ointment into old scars. You rehearse accents, practice limping convincingly, review your exits. You even keep a list of convincing fake names tucked into your boot. Favorites include Brother Doolin and Jasper the Tinker. Least favorite? Marnley Shivs. Long story. Involved soup and a misunderstanding. Your wardrobe is a pile of drab colors and versatile layers. No red silks or jeweled belts here, though you did once inherit a nobleman's hat after a successful job. You wore it twice before realizing it made you look like a lost theater extra. You keep a hidden stash of odd tools, hollowed-out rings, poisoned pins, a priest's stole, even a pair of false teeth. Why? Because sometimes you need to be a preacher or an ailing uncle or someone so boring that no one remembers you 5 minutes later. And then there's the eating, or lack of it. You nibble on dry bread, cheese hard enough to carve, and dried apples. Once you feasted on roasted pigeon. It was glorious, until you realized the vendor had used spoiled lard. You spent the next 2 days curled up next to a chamber pot, hallucinating about dancing skeletons. You miss warm baths and soft beds and uninterrupted sleep, but you can't afford those. Luxury means visibility. Visibility means death. So you bathe with icy water from a rain barrel, scrub with rough soap, and dry with a cloth that could double as sandpaper. You tell yourself it builds character. It mostly builds chafing. Quirky tidbit. Some assassins were said to meditate by staring into candle flames, breathing slowly to steady their nerves. You've tried it. Mostly it just gives you headaches and the urge to sneeze. But still, there's ritual, a strange comfort in the routine. You lay your weapons out like sleeping pets. You check the seams of your tunic for loose threads that could catch. You stretch your arms and legs, quiet the noise in your head, and listen to the creak of the rafters, the distant hoot of an owl, the hiss of wind through a cracked window. It isn't glamorous, but it's necessary. You can't afford to rust, not physically, not mentally. Sometimes you receive word of a new job mid-rest, slipped under a door, whispered through a crack, or delivered via a coin wrapped in parchment. There's no discussion, no negotiation, just a name, a place, and an understanding that you'll get it done. You keep journals sometimes, not with real names, of course, just sketches, codes, impressions, a way to process what you've done and what's still to come. Your latest entry reads, "Wolf face, oil merchant, lies when he smiles." You'll remember what that means even weeks later. Once you carved an entire message into a piece of bread, sent it to another assassin baked into a loaf. Clever, yes, but it arrived half-eaten. Lesson learned. Never trust middlemen with snacks. You've learned to patch wounds with what's around. Spider silk, strong ale, stolen bandages, even melted beeswax once. You're not a healer, but you're inventive. You have to be. You rest when you can, not when you want. Some naps are 15 minutes long, stolen behind a woodpile or inside a hollow log. Others stretch for hours if you're lucky, but there's always the weight of alertness, like a cat napping with one eye open. The rarest treasure? A night with no job, no pursuit, no looming death. You sit on a rooftop and watch the stars. You wonder if the people walking below you will ever know how close they came to someone who ended lives before dinner. You hope not. And then, inevitably, the next signal comes. A bell tolls in a strange pattern. A child drops a wax-sealed envelope at your feet and scurries off. The wind shifts. It always shifts. So you stand. You gather your tools. You tighten your belt. The time for rest ends just like that. You become someone else again. Silent, invisible, dangerous. The safe house fades behind you like a dream you weren't sure you deserved. The town gate shuts behind you with that familiar, echoing thud. Equal parts final and theatrical. You're back on the road again. No fanfare, no companions, just the weight of your cloak and the knowledge that your next assignment lies several dusty miles away. Travel as a medieval assassin? It's a nightmare wrapped in mud. You trudge through rutted roads that seem to exist purely to trap your boots in puddles. Every step threatens a twisted ankle. Your pack's too heavy, your water's already warm, and some very ambitious flies have declared your left ear their new kingdom. You swat absently, but they always return. Forget romantic horseback rides into the mist. You rarely ride unless you've stolen the horse, and even then, it's usually some half-lame plow beast with a name like Turnip or Butter Cheeks. Most times, it's just you and your blistered feet keeping pace with your thoughts and the occasional ox cart. Quirky tidbit. In certain border towns, travelers were forced to carry a carved permission stick with town seals burned into the wood, like a medieval passport, but heavier and more flammable. You carry a fake one, of course, branded by someone who definitely wasn't sober. You hope no one looks too closely. You pass through endless fields and woodlands, dodging toll collectors, highwaymen, and overly curious monks. One time, a friar tried to convert you at sword point. You pretended to be deaf. He gave up and blessed your knees. You still don't know why. The roads are lined with stories. Once, you passed the aftermath of a feud. Two noble families fought over a pig. The pig survived. Neither family did. You ate a stolen sausage that night and hoped it wasn't poetic justice. Sleeping rough is part of the deal. Sometimes under trees, sometimes in abandoned sheds, sometimes in ditches so cold you dream in icicles. You learn to layer clothes creatively. You've worn undergarments on your head more than once just to keep warm. No one's judging. No one's around to. Historians still argue whether assassins traveled with coded maps or simply relied on word of mouth and memory. You've used both, but mostly it's instinct and landmarks. You follow moss on trees, watch the birds, ask discreet questions in towns you pass through. You've become fluent in the art of not seeming suspicious. You stop at inns when you can, but you never use the same name twice. You're Alric in one village, Tamsin in another. Once, when caught off guard, you said your name was Butter. The innkeeper blinked, then offered you a job churning cream. You left before dawn. Inns are both a blessing and a trap. Warm beds, real meals, and people to listen to, valuable. But they're also full of sharp eyes and looser tongues. One wrong move, and someone might remember your face, your voice, or the way you hold your spoon. You've become a master of blandness. Your goal is to look like no one, a traveling tailor, a quiet clerk, just forgettable enough. You avoid eye contact. You don't laugh loudly. You eat whatever's cheapest, slow and neat. You always sit facing the door. You've shared rooms with snoring merchants, runaway lovers, and once a man who wept quietly all night into a turnip. You didn't ask, he didn't explain. Every once in a while you travel with a caravan, safety in the numbers. But that means talking, smiling, playing the part. You've claimed to be a candle maker, a goat breeder, even a minor scholar of beetle habits. Your goat breeder impression involves bleeding. People love it. You hate it. There's always risk on the road. Ambushes, thieves. You've been held up twice. Once by a group of teens with sticks. They demanded your coin pouch. You gave them a fake one. They ran, giddy. You walked away with your real pouch and a story. One time you passed a burning village. No signs of battle, no raiders nearby. Just ashes and silence and a single roasted cabbage rolling through the street. You helped an old woman bury her family. She gave you a talisman, an acorn carved with a strange symbol. You still carry it. The weather never cooperates. Mud turns to frost, turns to sweat, turns back to mud. You've waded through snow up to your thighs and crossed bridges so rickety even squirrels refused them. Once, a sudden storm trapped you in a cave for 3 days with a goat and your own terrible thoughts. You named the goat Balthazar. He judged you. You pass towns that stink of fish, towns that echo with laughter, towns that don't even have names anymore. Every place is both new and painfully familiar. Market stalls, gossiping locals, tired guards who never check papers properly. You smile, nod, and keep walking. You're constantly tracking time, not in days, but in sun positions, in calloused feet, in the ache in your knees. You know you're getting close when the accents shift and the bread gets saltier. And then finally, the town appears. Just a blur on the horizon, a puff of chimney smoke, a shape rising from the hills. Your pace picks up, not because you're excited, but because the next phase begins. You straighten your tunic, rub the mud from your boots. You start to become someone else again. Maybe a merchant, maybe a novice monk, maybe just a lost cousin with a funny accent. You cross the threshold, and the town swallows you. Nobody knows what you are. Nobody sees you. That's the goal. But every step inside the walls feels like walking a tightrope above suspicion. And you're getting very good at not falling. You've entered the town under a new name, Brother Callum, this time. It fits the monkish robe you're wearing, itchy wool and all. You shuffle a little, like your knees are creaky from prayer, and smile faintly at anyone who meets your eyes. People ignore you. That's good. That's the goal. Now comes the most important part, learning everything without letting anyone learn anything about you. You start small, public places, slow movements, ears open. The market is best. People there talk freely. You walk past a fishmonger arguing over scales, a gossiping pair near the onions. A butcher laughs too loud and says someone important got what he deserved. You file that away. Could be useful. You watch how people walk, how they dress, who they avoid. Information here isn't written on scrolls. It's painted on the way a baker flinches when a certain guard walks past. You know how to read it. The whole town is talking, even when it's silent. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, medieval butchers were considered low-tier informants because they saw everyone and were paid to keep quiet. You've bribed more than one with salted meat and a wink. They always remember more than they admit. You ask questions sparingly, and only once you've listened long enough to know the answers. That way, you can sound surprised when someone tells you what you already know. Oh, that's the mayor's house, you say, like you didn't just spend the last hour watching it from a rooftop? Historians still argue whether medieval assassins had organized spy networks or simply operated alone with local help. In your case, a bit of both. You have contacts, people who owe favors or who like coin more than morals. You never use the same one twice in a row. That's how you stay alive. Today, it's a stable boy named Goffrey, all freckles and nervous glances. You pay him a few silver bits to point out who comes and goes at the city manor. He tells you about the lady with the limp, the merchant who always arrives late, the new guard with the sharp eyes. Gold, that kind of detail. You also know who not to talk to. The too friendly landlord, the drunk bard, the local tanner who's built like an ox and always seems to know your business before you've even walked in. Your job isn't just to find the target, it's to understand the entire world around them. Who protects them? Who wants them gone? Who might help you, even without realizing it? You loiter near the chapel, pretending to pray. Turns out the priest is unusually well informed. You hear him whisper to a widow that sin catches up to everyone, even that snake in velvet. He doesn't say who the snake is, but you've seen enough velvet lately to narrow it down. Sometimes you follow children. They know the alleys, the quiet places, the servants' entrances. They play games that mimic real events. You've seen kids reenact an execution with surprising detail. Grim, but informative. They learn from watching, just like you. Your feet hurt from the constant circling. You walk the town perimeter 3 times before noon. By now, you've mapped every street in your mind. The locked doors, the broken fences, the blind alleys, The bakery that always smells 2 hours ahead of lunchtime. You know where you could run, where you could hide, and where you'd be cornered. Your target is inside a manor, large, guarded, and unfortunately not crumbling. It's in good repair. That's bad news for you. Cracks are easier to exploit than competence. So you shadow a servant. He limps, which means he moves slower, and you follow him from a distance, counting windows and memorizing doors. He drops a bag of turnips and curses creatively. You help him bow your head, offer a fake blessing in a gravelly monk voice. He nods, grumbles, walks off. You now know where the kitchen door is. You retreat to a tavern, not to drink, well, not much, just a half mug to sit with, enough to blend in. You let your ears work while your eyes stay low. Someone plays a lute badly. Someone else is snoring into their stew. The town crier bursts in, announces a theft at the docks. Nothing about you. That's how it should be. You catch a name, your target's name, in a whispered conversation between two merchants. They mention debts, the word traitor, and something about smuggled relics. Interesting. You slide a bit of bread between your teeth, chew slowly. You'll visit the docks later. Information isn't just found, it's earned. You drop a few silver coins into the tavern maid's palm, not for anything scandalous, just curiosity about who comes in and out. She raises an eyebrow, tells you about a man with a gold ring and snake eyes. That sounds promising. And sometimes there's nothing to do but sit on a bench and watch. Let the town flow around you. People watching becomes a sacred act. A man with a twitch in his eye, maybe fear. A woman who always walks the long way around a house, maybe a grudge. A boy who mimics a soldier's march, maybe a brother in the guard. You even watch the cats. They tend to loiter where there's food or death. Everything is part of the pattern, every offhand comment, every forgotten scarf, every mismatched story. Your mind's a net, and you've gotten good at catching lies before they even finish forming. Night falls. You sneak to a rooftop to observe the manor again. Lanterns glow. Servants come and go. You see your target in a second-story window, leaning over papers, his profile lit by candlelight. You now know where he sleeps. But knowledge isn't the end, it's the beginning. You've learned the layout, the patterns, the habits. You've identified risks. Now you need a plan. And you need to find your opening. You smile beneath your hood. Information always leads to opportunity. And tonight, you've gathered more than enough. You crouch on the rooftop, watching your target's manor flicker like a stubborn lantern in the dark. The town quiets around you. Windows shutter. Laughter fades. Footsteps disappear. Now it's just you and the chill in your bones, and the fact that you're about to risk everything again for someone else's vengeance. Because planning a kill, that's an art form, and you're something of a reluctant artist. This one's tricky. The manor is well kept, the guard rotation's tight. No obvious gaps, no lazy watchmen taking secret naps behind barrels. Whoever this noble is, they've clearly made enemies before, and learned from it. You've got to be creative. First, the tools. You inventory your gear in your head. A dagger, short, quiet, dull from last week's escapade. A small pouch of powder that'll knock out a bull if it's inhaled, but only if you time it perfectly. A bit of twine, a wax seal stamp that isn't yours, and your lucky coin with a bite taken out of it. You've done worse with less. Mainstream historical fact. Poison was a common tool for medieval assassins, quiet, efficient, and easier to deny than a dagger in the ribs. You once tried poison in a stew. The dog ate it first. That job ended creatively. You're not proud. You return to the ground silently, cloak fluttering like a half-hearted ghost. You'll approach this from the back. That kitchen door, remember? It opens just before dawn to toss out scraps. You plan to be there first. Timing matters more than you think. You spend the entire next day pacing like a nervous monk. Every chime of the town bell helps you measure how often the guards switch, when the servants come and go, when the manor sleeps, and when it twitches awake. You even count how long it takes the scullery maid to empty the slop bucket. 28 seconds. People forget the little things, but you don't. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins worked off a code of ethics, certain targets only, no innocents harmed. You've heard both sides. You've bent both rules. You tell yourself you avoid unnecessary death, but sometimes the situation doesn't leave room for neat morals. Like now, because this particular noble, he's careful, always surrounded. And tonight, the only quiet path in involves getting past a very unfortunate cook with bad eyesight and a tendency to hum lullabies while chopping leeks. You consider alternatives. Scaling the walls? Too exposed. Disguising yourself as a servant? Possible, but there's no way to forge the manor's livery in time. The kitchen's still your best shot. If you can slip in during the dawn meal prep and hide until the house sleeps again. Quirky tidbit, in some wealthy homes, kitchens were locked from the outside to prevent food theft from underpaid staff. Irony alert, you're hoping someone forgets to lock it. You prepare as best you can. You crush the knockout powder into a finer dust, soak a bit of cloth in it, tuck it carefully in your sleeve. You bind your dagger to your thigh with a strip of linen and pray it doesn't slip mid-crawl. You darken your face with soot, less shadow to cast. And then you wait. In a barrel. Behind the manor. Yes, a barrel. You sit scrunched, knees to chest, trying not to sneeze at the scent of old onions and the unfortunate rat that did not survive last week. You remind yourself this is glamorous work, noble work. Just you, destiny, and rodent aftershave. Finally, footsteps. The kitchen door creaks open. A loud thump of slop hits the ground. A sigh. The door starts to close. You're out before it clicks shut, sliding a scrap of wood into the frame to keep it from locking. You slip inside, silent as mist. You crouch in a dark corner behind the potato sacks. The cook hums just as expected. You time your breath with hers. The room is warm, filled with the scent of bread and something vaguely turnipy-ish. Hours pass. Light spills in through the high windows. People come and go. You do not move. Your knees go numb. Someone spills gravy on your boot and doesn't notice. Finally, silence. The cook snuffs the hearth and leaves yawning. It's just you. You move now, slowly, reverently, like the house is a living creature that might wake if you step too loud. Up the back stairs, past the linen closet, through a narrow hall filled with family portraits, all of them scowling. You spot your target's door, second on the left. You press your ear to it. Snoring. Good. You slip inside. There he is, your mark, half covered in velvet sheets, snoring like a mule. A candlestick flickers beside him. The room smells like rose water and old guilt. You don't hesitate. You can't afford to. You cross the room, raise your cloth of powder, but then he stirs, mumbles something. You freeze. A full 10 seconds pass before the snoring resumes. You press the cloth to his face. He fights, just a little, then fades. You ease him back, listen to his breath steady. Alive. For now. Because this one isn't a kill order. It's delivery. You need him unconscious, but breathing. You check your scroll again. Right. He's wanted alive, gagged, and deposited outside the city walls before sunrise. Of course, the hard ones always come with fine print. You hoist him over your shoulder, groaning silently. Velvet is heavier than it looks. So are noble regrets. Now you have to get him out without anyone noticing, which means taking the servant stairwell, dodging the maid coming in with linens, pretending the body is just a sack of old flour, like that ever works, and hoping to every forgotten saint that no one wakes up curious. It works. Barely. You slip through the back door just as the sun breaks over the rooftops. No fanfare, no applause. Just you, a sleepy noble tied to a mule cart, and the slow realization that you've pulled off the impossible again. You leave a wax seal, fake but convincing, on his forehead, a message of sorts. And then you walk away, quiet, anonymous, like it never happened. Except for the part where your shoulder still hurts, your boots squish, and you've got flour in your hair from hiding behind sacks. Assassination? It's more work than people think. You sleep for 14 hours after that last job, face down in an inn that smells like mildew and boiled cabbage. When you finally come to, it's not relief you feel, it's dread. Because the hardest part of this life isn't the sneaking or the killing. It's staying invisible afterward. The town isn't safe anymore. It might feel like you got away clean, but someone always notices something. A servant mentions the extra gravy spill. A stable hand remembers an odd sound near the kitchen door. The noble? He'll wake up foggy but furious, and powerful men don't let humiliation go unanswered. So, it's time to disappear. You leave the inn at dawn. No goodbye, no tab paid, though you leave a coin under your plate because you're not a complete monster. You wrap your face in a dusty scarf and blend into the merchant caravan rolling out of town. You're Corvin today, a traveling relic cleaner with a slight cough and a passion for quiet. Changing identities is a skill you've refined to an art. You've been a monk, a mute, a foreign pilgrim, a drunk beekeeper, and once, regrettably, a one-eyed jester. That one lasted less than a day. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval Europe, identity papers weren't standardized, which made it relatively easy for someone to reinvent themselves in a new town. You're grateful for that. Modern paperwork would have killed you long ago. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins had organized safe houses or relied purely on improvisation. You suspect it was both. You've stayed in cellars, abbeys, barns, and once the loft of a kindly widow who thought you were her long-lost nephew. You didn't correct her. This time, your next stop is a village about a day's ride away. You don't know it well, but that's the point. Fewer connections, fewer questions. You arrive just after sunset, limping a little for effect. People are more forgiving when they think you're in pain. First stop, the bathhouse. Nothing screams not a murderer like clean fingernails and soft hands. Also, it helps you wash away any scent of the city, literally. You soak for a while, eavesdrop a bit, pick up the local gossip. Turns out this village has its own troubles. Sheep going missing, someone poisoning the well, and a local baker who may or may not be hiding a secret lover in her flower closet. You commit it all to memory. Next, you find a small tavern and rent the corner bed under the stairs. It's damp, it's drafty, but it's quiet. That's all you need. Quirky tidbit: one of the oldest known assassin's tools wasn't a weapon. It was a set of hand signals used to silently communicate with allies in crowded spaces. You've used something similar with your network: a twitch of the wrist, a bent thumb, a casual lean. Language without words. You spend a few days laying low. No contracts, no missions, just watching. The rhythm of rural life is different, slower. People notice new faces more. You become the sickly brother of a traveling scribe. You fake a limp. You pet goats. You tell stories by the fire that don't belong to you. It almost feels normal, but you're not normal, and eventually your past starts to catch up. You notice it first in the eyes of a merchant. He stares a second too long at your face, doesn't say anything, just sips his wine and looks again. You hear a rumor about a bounty, someone matching your general build, traveling alone, known to wear a long hood like a crow. Your blood goes cold. You haven't worn that cloak since the last town, but it's enough. You change ends, again. You toss your old clothes into a river. You cut your hair unevenly with a borrowed knife. You forge a letter in Latin, claiming you're a minor priest from Normandy, here to teach penmanship. No one questions Latin, especially not villagers. Still, you don't sleep well. That's the real trick of staying invisible. You can't ever relax. You're not allowed to have a favorite tavern, a close friend, or even a preferred way of speaking. You have to forget what comfort tastes like, or you'll crave it, and craving leads to mistakes. You start talking less. You use hand signals in your sleep. You flinch when someone calls your fake name too cheerfully. Eventually, you get word, a message passed in a scrap of linen through a traveling laundry girl. It's from someone you trust. Barely. It says, "Your name's not clean. There's heat coming from the east. You need to vanish." You burn the linen. You don't ask who sent it. You pack before sunset. The next village is 3 days away. You travel alone, avoiding main roads. You sleep in the crooks of trees and drink from streams. The nights are loud. Wolves, owls, your own haunted thoughts. You reach the village and decide not to use a name at all this time. You simply nod, smile faintly, and point at your throat when someone speaks to you. Mute. Again. Always a good fallback. You rent space in a stable loft. You sweep floors, clean hooves, mind your own business. You don't kill anyone for weeks, not because the world's gotten kinder, but because survival sometimes means silence. You read faces like maps. The angry drunk? Avoid. The quiet grandmother? Probably sharper than she looks. The miller's apprentice? Definitely stealing flour, but who isn't? You're a ghost now, moving through the edges of other people's lives. Not living, not really, just continuing. And one night, while staring at a cracked wooden ceiling and a straw-stuffed mattress, you ask yourself what all this is for. The endless hiding, the fake names, the broken identities stitched together with silence and shadows. But you know the answer. It's not for money. Not really. It's not for honor or thrill or even freedom. It's because you made a choice once, a long time ago. Maybe to avenge someone. Maybe to survive. Maybe because someone pointed at a name on a scroll and you said, "I'll do it." And once you start walking this path, there's no turning around. Because who would you even be if you stopped? The next morning, you pack again. Someone, somewhere, will need you. You'll become someone else. Again. And disappear.
You ride with a caravan now, though ride is generous. You mostly walk beside a donkey named Gregor, who seems to judge your life choices with every sideways glance. The caravan moves slow, selling cheap cloth and cheaper perfume between towns that barely have names. And you? You're a mute weaver with a scar on your hand and a tragic backstory no one's rude enough to ask about. You're getting good at this. Too good. But staying invisible doesn't mean you stop working. You still take contracts, passed in whispers or carved into the undersides of wooden bowls. Some are simple. Track a man, mark his route, report back. Others, not so much. Like the one you just accepted. Your next target isn't a person, it's a scroll. A scroll you're told must disappear from the Abbey's archive before midsummer, or terrible things will happen. Dramatic but vague. You're used to that. The problem, this abbey is a fortress, not in the literal stone walls and moat sense, but in the worse way. Discipline. Monks who wake before dawn, bells that ring like clockwork, no gaps, no shadows. Mainstream historical fact, Many medieval monasteries kept detailed records, not just of scripture, but of legal dealings, land ownership, even secret negotiations between nobles. Stealing from them, that was a different beast entirely. Your first step is to infiltrate. You forge a letter from a bishop, written in a careful blend of Latin and boredom, asking the abbey to accept a humble, silent illuminator recovering from divine trauma. You show up with ink-stained fingers, a downcast gaze, and a habit too short by 2 inches. No one notices. They give you a small cell with a wooden cot and a single candle stub. Luxury. You spend the first week copying psalms and pretending not to understand German. You listen. You learn. The scroll you need is locked in the scriptorium's vault, behind a thick iron door that's opened only twice a week for approved scholars. You're not one of them. Yet, you befriend a young monk with a stutter and a love for parchment. You help him clean quills. You nod patiently through his nervous stories about St. Columba's legendary temper and that one time a goose exploded in the chapel. You're still not sure if he was joking. Eventually, he lets slip the vault schedule and who has the key. You already know the rest. Late night, careful timing, silence like snow. But monks are harder to slip past than guards. They don't get drunk, they don't sleep through shifts, and they're terrifyingly good at noticing when a candle stub has burned a little too far. Historians still argue whether monastic vaults were booby-trapped or simply well guarded by obsessive routines. You're leaning toward the latter. These men count everything, from grains of rice to goose feathers to the number of floorboards that creak near the reliquary. So, you bide your time. 2 more weeks. You start to enjoy the rhythm, just a little. Bells, prayers, ink, sleep. You even hum a hymn once before catching yourself. Then, one night, you make your move. You fake a fever. Dramatic coughs, eyes red from onion juice. You're given rest from copying duties for 2 days. You hide in the attic above the scriptorium during the midnight bells. It's cold. You shiver so hard the dust vibrates around you. Finally, you lower yourself down, quiet as fog. The lock on the vault is old. You've studied it for days. The key lives around the neck of Brother Ulrich, who keeps it close even while sleeping. That's fine. You're not after the key. You're after a moment. Ulrich rises every 3rd night to pray. You've timed it. When he leaves his cell, you slip in behind him, noiseless, breath shallow. You spot the chain on his nightstand. You lift it. Almost done. But then, a creak. A mouse? A saint's ghost? Doesn't matter. You freeze. Footsteps echo outside. You dive under the cot, heart pounding like anvil strikes. The footsteps pass. You slip out again, key in hand. Back to the vault. Turn once, pause. Turn twice. Click. The door opens. You slide inside. It's colder in here. The scrolls are bundled in linen, tagged with neat Latin titles. You find yours. The mark is clear, just like the order described. You unroll it just enough to see what all the fuss is about. Land records, political names, a signed deal between 2 families who should hate each other, a betrayal buried in ink, blackmail material of the highest order. No wonder someone wants it gone. But you're not done. Just taking it would raise questions. Instead, you swap it, same weight, same wrapping, with a forged copy you prepared in secret. The changes are subtle. Names reversed, dates adjusted, a few strokes turned into legal poison. You resealed the bundle, return the key, slither back to your attic hideout. Sleep doesn't come. Next morning, Brother Ulrich mentions feeling unusually rested. You smile and nod, imagining how the monks will unravel when this scroll ends up in the wrong hands. Quirky tidbit? Some scrolls were written in disappearing ink using lemon juice, only visible under heat. I once fell for that trick. The parchment seemed blank until someone held it over a lantern and revealed a very rude message about your mother. 2 days later, you leave the abbey. You claim you've had a vision. Time to wander again. They nod solemnly. Another monk replaces you without asking your name. Back on the road, you feel it again. Not pride, not relief, just emptiness. Because for all your cleverness, you're still a shadow. People remember the forged scroll, the missing noble, the silent brother with careful hands. But they don't remember you. You wonder briefly what it might be like to be remembered, to have your real name spoken without fear, to tell your story in full, no aliases, no lies, no locked doors. Then you hear footsteps behind you. You turn, just a traveler, passing by. Still, your hand drifts to your dagger, because being forgotten is safer, but it's also lonelier than you ever imagined. You're starting to forget what your original voice sounded like. The real one, not the accents you've borrowed like cloaks. You catch your reflection in a puddle and flinch. It's not the face, it's the expression. Blank, studied, ready. But tonight, you're playing a role you hate more than most. Court entertainer. You've just arrived at the manor of Lord Bronick, a pompous noble known for long dinners, petty grudges, and a suspicious number of accidental falls from his balcony. He's the kind of man who doesn't dirty his own hands, but plenty of people wind up bruised after a handshake. Your contract? Get close to him. Learn what he's planning, and if need be, make sure he doesn't reach next spring. They're not paying you to laugh, but unfortunately, you'll need to make others laugh, and dance, and pretend you can't count to 20 without using your toes. Mainstream historical fact: entertainers, jesters, fools, minstrels, were among the few people who could move between noble courts freely, often slipping past suspicion under the guise of comic relief. Some were even trusted confidants. Others, quiet spies with good memory and better timing. You play the fool with convincing flair. Your jester's cap itches. Your bell only rings when you want it to. You pretend to trip over your own feet at dinner, spilling wine on a minor baron who's too drunk to be offended. The hall roars with laughter. They never suspect the fool. You study Lord Bronick hum behind your goblet. He's younger than expected, sharp-eyed. He talks in circles, praises mediocre poetry, and asks suspiciously pointed questions about trade routes and border skirmishes. He's planning something, and it isn't a spring festival. You slip through the manor by night, still in costume, because who would be afraid of a drunk jester in floppy shoes? You learn fast. Bronick has secret meetings in the library, late at night. He receives strange letters sealed with black wax. One servant swears he heard Bronick speaking with a foreign tongue, though no one else believes him. You do. Your target may be dabbling in treason, or sorcery, or both, which is awkward, because you're only being paid to watch, not act, yet. Medieval historians still argue whether medieval nobles truly practiced sorcery or simply pretended to for power. You've seen enough midnight rituals and suspicious goat blood stains to know some of them weren't playing. So you watch, and wait. Then the twist. Someone's watching you. At first it's subtle, a page who lingers near your room, a maid who avoids your eyes, but knows exactly where you're supposed to be. Even the cook stirs his soup in time with your footsteps. You've been made. You try to slip away in the early morning. You almost succeed. But you're intercepted by a knight in half armor and full suspicion. He smiles without warmth and asks what a jester is doing near the stables before dawn. You give him your best joke about a drunk bishop, a cow, and a missing hymnal. He doesn't laugh. Quirky tidbit: some medieval entertainers carried fool's permits, small tokens or badges that proved they were licensed jesters under noble protection. You forge one on the spot, carving it into a piece of soap, drying it in your sleeve, and bluffing your way out with a haughty cough and an insult to the knight's haircut. It works. Barely.
You know your time is up. The plan changes. You can't just watch anymore. You have to act. Quietly, cleanly, before Bronick starts tying loose ends. You write a final report, encoded in a crude limerick sewn into the hem of a tapestry, delivered by a kitchen boy, with no idea he's carrying the fate of a region in his greasy hands. That night, during Bronick's feast, you perform your final act. A mock duel, with fake swords and exaggerated groans. You time your slip near his chair perfectly. As you fall, your dagger slides into the space behind the curtain, hidden, not used, just in case. Later, you find Bronick in the garden, alone, drunk, mumbling about ships and secrets and a deal sealed in shadow. He doesn't recognize you in the half-light. You smile sadly. You don't kill him, but you whisper the name of the man he fears most, someone you know is watching, and then walk away. You leave him trembling, unsure who you are, what you know, or whether death has already tapped his shoulder. The next morning, you vanish. No final joke, no goodbye, just an empty bed and a jester's cap hung neatly on the door. 2 weeks later, you hear that Lord Bronick has resigned his title and joined a monastery. They say he's found God. You suspect he found fear first. You're already someone else by then. This time, a traveling herbalist. Quiet, competent, mildly boring. You sell dried lavender and advice about indigestion to middle-aged merchants with bloated egos. It's peaceful. But even in the quiet, you keep listening, because the game never stops. You just shift boards. You've worn a lot of masks by now, some too well. The fool, the monk, the mute, the noble's cousin from the countryside with oddly military posture. Each one becomes a little harder to remove. You're not sure who you are underneath, and maybe by now, that's the point. You're half asleep in a tavern stable, sharing straw with a dog that snores louder than a blacksmith's hammer when a courier finds you. He doesn't know your real name, just a phrase, the fox with no den. You sigh, really, that old code again, and accept the sealed letter with the wax already half cracked. It smells like rosewater and burnt almonds. Bad omen. The message is short. 7 words. It's time. You know where. No weapons. You do know where. The city of Venhelm, a bloated jewel set beside a green river, famous for its spires, its corruption, and its oddly aggressive swans. You haven't been there in years, not since your last job went wrong and a bishop's nephew lost 3 toes and a title. But you go. You always go. Mainstream historical fact. Late medieval cities like Venhelm, or, let's be honest, dozens of similar real-world stand-ins, were walled, labyrinthian, and often politically autonomous. Some had elected councils, others were under noble rule. All of them had shadows deep enough to hide 100 secrets and 1,000 lies. You enter Venhelm at dusk. Your cover this time? A healer named Ansel, with a tragic past, a mysterious herbal salve, and a limp you invent on the spot. It earns you sympathy and fewer questions. No weapons, the message said. That means one of 2 things. Either this meeting is a trap or a peace offering. You meet her in the baths. Yes, those baths. Public, steamy, scandalous, and somehow more secure than any fortress. The constant noise, the nudity, the low-lit rooms where even sound seems to melt. No one watches anyone too closely in a bathhouse. You recognize her instantly, not by face, but by posture. Rigid spine, relaxed eyes, like someone ready to strike, but not yet. You sit beside her, Neither of you speaks for a while. Then she says, "You're still alive." You smile, uncomfortably. She's one of the old guard, a handler, maybe yours, maybe not. You've worked with her under half a dozen names. Once you shared a safe house for 3 weeks and a bottle of brandy that tasted like sadness. She leans close, voice barely louder than steam. There's a council forming. Everything is shifting. Someone wants you to take a side. I raise an eyebrow. I thought I didn't have a side. Then you'll be flattened between two. Historians still argue whether shadow networks of spies and assassins had structured alliances in the later Middle Ages, or if most were just desperate freelancers circling power like wolves around a fire. What you're hearing now suggests both, organized chaos with very sharp teeth. The job she offers you isn't subtle. It's not even technically a job. It's a vote, a choice. There's a man, an upstart, a reformer, a visionary, depending who you ask, who's making noise in the North. A noble turned populist, they say, wants to restore dignity to the commoners and kneecap the entrenched elites. Bad news for your kind of work. He's asking ex-assassins to come out of the shadows, to work for justice, instead of merely disrupting power on command. It sounds laughable, noble, doomed. She leaves you with a pendant, worn silver, just a fox, no chain. She says, "If you wear it, you'll be found." You sit there long after she's gone, letting the water turn your skin pink and your thoughts muddy. You've killed corrupt lords and innocent messengers. You've stolen truths and rewritten lies. You've saved lives, too, but never because it was right, just because it was profitable. What would it mean to pick a side, to believe in something beyond survival? The next day you wander Venhelm like a ghost. You pass a street magician pulling coins from children's ears and wonder how much gold is hidden in those little hands. You pass a soldier praying at a shrine and remember the monks whose cell you once slept in. You pass a woman selling love potions and realize you've never really been loved, not once, not with your real name. Quirky tidbit, some medieval love potions contained ingredients like dried beetles, powdered pearls, or the left shoe of a virgin goat. You never tried one, not even when you were 16 and stupid. By nightfall, you find yourself staring at the pendant. You don't wear it, not yet. Instead, you send a message back, not to the handler, but to him, this noble rebel you've never met. It simply reads, "If your vision includes people like me, then maybe it's worth seeing. Convince me." You don't expect a reply, but 1 week later, a boy with ink-stained fingers finds you at an inn 2 towns south. He hands you a letter, bows, and runs before you can ask his name. The seal? Broken. The contents? A quote from some ancient philosopher you've never bothered to read. Something about shadows only existing because of light. You chuckle, then fold the letter into your boot. Maybe for once you're not being hunted. Maybe you're being offered something. Still, you leave town by night, just in case. You're not done yet. You've worn many faces, but one of them might just be yours. You're climbing a mountain now. Not metaphorically, actually climbing, step by brutal step along a goat trail that seems more like a rumor than a path. The wind is sharp enough to peel skin, and your breath fogs out in thick, exhausted clouds. Behind you, valleys stretch like crumpled paper. Ahead, a monastery, hidden in mist and stories, built into the rock like a stubborn truth. They say it's a neutral ground, that assassins, spies, and smugglers sometimes leave tokens here, messages, confessions, pacts. A place where no blade is drawn and all masks are left at the gate. You're bringing a letter, sealed with red wax and no name. Inside, a list of names,
places, dates, enough to shift power in a dozen cities. You don't know who wrote it, but you know it matters. Mainstream historical fact. Monasteries in the late Middle Ages were more than religious retreats. They were hubs of information, record-keeping, and quiet diplomacy. Some even served as neutral meeting grounds for rival nobles or more shadowy figures who needed a place to vanish without truly disappearing. The monk at the gate doesn't ask questions. He just nods and lets you in. He's blind in one eye and smells faintly of turnips. You trust him instantly. You sleep in a stone cell with straw bedding and a ceiling low enough to make you feel tall. It's the best rest you've had in years. The letter is delivered, and you're left with nothing. No new orders, no next move, just cold wind and quiet prayers. You spend 3 days in silence, helping cook turnip stew and rebind crumbling scrolls. You find a manuscript with a margin note that reads, "Tell no lies, especially to yourself." It hits harder than you expect. Historians still argue whether monasteries offered genuine sanctuary to those outside the law, or whether that idea is more legend than truth. But you know this. No one asked why your boots were stained with blood. No one pretended you were something you weren't. And in a strange way, that honesty made the silence deafening. On the 4th night, you walk the courtyard under moonlight. Snow has started falling, slow and lazy. You catch flakes on your tongue like you did as a child, back when your hands were still clean and your heart still open. You wonder if you ever had a name you didn't fake. You wonder if it matters. Then comes the soft scrape of shoes on stone. She's here again. The handler, or maybe just a shadow of her. Hooded, hands gloved, voice like broken glass wrapped in silk. She says, "There's one last job," and hands you a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. You open it. A knife, your old one, the one you left behind in Venhelm when you walked away from the life. The hilt is still cracked from where it blocked an axe. You stare at it for a long time. You say, "No." It's not a refusal, just a fact, like snow, like breath, like guilt. But she just shrugs. Thought you might say that. She pulls something else from her cloak, the fox pendant. You take it. Not because you're ready, because maybe it's time to stop hiding from something and start heading toward something. You leave the monastery at dawn. No horse, no pack, just a coat that smells of turnips and a pendant tucked beneath your shirt. Downhill feels different than up, like gravity's working with you for once. You pass through forests humming with birds and meadows stitched with frost. And in your chest, something strange. The beginning of a heartbeat that isn't just survival. You pass a village at the foot of the mountain. A boy is crying because he dropped his bread in the mud. You buy him another and joke that it tastes better with dirt. He smiles, unsure. You're not wearing a disguise. Not anymore. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, villagers believed that a stranger who arrived during snowfall brought good luck, especially if they shared food or gave a gift. You're not sure if that's true, but for once, you're not bringing death. Just a fox and a tired smile. You find work mending walls, literally. A crumbled barn, a collapsed fence. You fix things with your hands instead of knives. One night, someone tries to steal your boots. You don't kill them. You give them bread and tell them the boots were never comfortable anyway. And the next morning, they come back to help you finish the barn. You begin to imagine a life with space in it. Not silence for secrets, but quiet for peace. Maybe not permanent, maybe not safe, but possible. You've lived under orders your entire life. Now you wake when you want, eat when you're hungry, laugh when it feels right, not when it buys you cover. The pendant stays around your neck, not as a signal, as a reminder. You were a ghost once. Now, you're becoming real.
The village is starting to feel like yours, even though no one knows your real name, and half of them still think you're a slightly odd mason from somewhere west. That's fine. You're not here to be a hero, or even a story. You're just here, breathing, eating soup that tastes too salty, and helping fix crooked doors. Until one morning, a rider comes. Cloak torn, face mud slick, horse trembling from the run. He doesn't ask for you by name, of course not, but he describes your boots, the ones you gave away. You're sitting in the sun when he finds you. He hands over a sealed note with trembling fingers, then rides on without a word. You recognize the wax. It's the rebel noble, the idealist, the one who quoted philosophy and tried to drag assassins toward hope. You open the letter. It's a list, not targets this time. Protectees. A count's daughter who dared speak out, a monk who uncovered forged tax ledgers, a baker who's organizing laborers in the capital. People who might help change something if they live long enough. You close your eyes. You should burn it. Walk away. You found peace here. Friends who only know you as Ansel, a dog that follows you home and sleeps at your door. Kids who think you're the village giant. But the letter burns in your pocket like a second heartbeat. Mainstream historical fact. Toward the end of the Middle Ages, uprisings and reform movements began stirring in both cities and rural regions, often led not by nobles, but by craftsmen, monks, and women with too much sense to stay silent. Their stories are often erased or warped, but they laid groundwork that would echo for centuries. You're being asked not to kill someone, but to keep people alive. That's new. That's terrifying. You sit with it for a while. Let the idea seep into your bones. The risk, the shift, the fact that it isn't glory, and it's definitely not safety. But it might be worth it. You dig a hole behind the house and bury your last set of blades. Then you pack a satchel, rope, ointments, coin, food, and the fox pendant. You tell the villagers you've got a cousin up north who needs help with a flooded granary. They nod, offer bread, clap your shoulder like they'll see you in a week or two. You leave before dawn. The road is soft with dew. The sky hasn't decided what color to be yet. You walk, not like someone running away or chasing a mark, but like someone finally choosing a direction. You know people are watching, always have been, but this time, maybe they're watching to follow. Maybe the ones in the shadows aren't ghosts anymore. Maybe they're gathering a new kind of order. Not for power, but for balance. To keep the wrong people from dying too soon and the right people from dying alone. Historians still argue whether any such protective guild of former assassins ever existed. But if it did, it wouldn't leave monuments. Just the quiet ripple of someone still breathing because someone else made sure they could. You walk past a ruined watchtower and think about the monk who told you, "Tell no lies, especially to yourself." You think you're finally ready. And just like that, it starts again. Only this time, you're not a blade. You're a shield. You're not the nightmare in the dark. You're the shadow that moves just before the lantern falls. You've walked a long road this night, across rooftops and alleyways, banquet halls and silent monasteries, through disguises and doubts and too many names to count. Being a medieval assassin, well, it wasn't glamour. It wasn't honor. It was sleepless nights and muddy boots,
poisoned rings and whispered lies, all woven into a world where trust could be fatal and your only reward was surviving another winter. And yet, there was something else too. A flicker beneath the ash. A question. What happens if you stop running? If you lay down your blade, not out of exhaustion, but by choice? Could someone like you, who's taken so much, ever give something back? Maybe not in grand gestures. Maybe just in small things. Protecting a voice. Sheltering a spark. Leaving behind something more than silence. As the night deepens, let your breath slow. Let the air grow cooler, softer. The tension in your shoulders melting down into stillness. You don't have to decide anything now. Not tonight. Tonight you're safe. The chase has paused. The blade is sheathed. The story, at least for now, is at peace. So close your eyes, steady your breath, and imagine snow falling gently outside your window. A fox curled in the corner, watching, waiting. Your journey's not over. But for now, it can rest. Thanks for keeping me company tonight. Wherever you are and whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. Sleep well, and I'll see you again next time. Good night.